A Minnesota senator focusing on jobs, education, and economic development announces she'll be stepping down from her role. We'll talk about her tenure in this half hour. Welcome to Oakdale Update. I'm your host, Frank Orsello. She served in the Minnesota legislature for nearly 10 years, representing the people of District 53, focusing on transportation and health care, among other concerns. We're pleased to have Senator Susan Kent on today's show. Welcome, Susan, to Oakdale Update. This is probably about the 10th time you've been on here, at least,
It's been a lot, Frank, and always a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, that's good. I enjoy having you, too. Okay, so let's get started here. Tell us about yourself. Give us your background and that sort of thing.
So my background, sometimes people can hear my accent. I'm actually not originally from here. I'm one of those people who had the good sense to marry a Minnesotan.
Yeah.
But I grew up in New Orleans and went to college in Texas. My career was, and that's where I met him, my career was in marketing and advertising and communications. And when we moved up here with our son, who was 2 years old at the time, which is hard to believe because he's now 20.
Oh, my goodness, really?
I know. But it was because of the family and the quality of life here in Minnesota, and we've just loved it. And I got real involved in local schools when he was little, and one thing led to another, and I ran for office in 2012. That was a redistricting year, so there are a lot of kind of bookends in all of this. And it has been an incredible privilege to serve the people of Senate District 53 in these years.
Oh, and we're happy to have you, too. So, okay, you represent District 53. Where is District 53?
The easiest way to describe 53 is it is the entire city of Woodbury and landfall, and then I've got South Maplewood up to the train tracks is the official border.
You're that, okay.
Yeah, and Oakdale up to 10th Street. I have so I'm proud to have Tartan High School in my district.
Oh, is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is your third this is the third time you're
term.
going around.
Yes.
Okay, third term. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so when did you start then again?
So I was sworn in 2013.
2013.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so Senate Minority Leader, where you're currently on a finance committee, among other committees.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. I mean,
Yeah.
what's it like to be on a committee? What does that mean?
Yep. So, and I recently stepped down as Senate Minority Leader, as you mentioned, because I turned that role. I retired from that role because I had made the decision that I could not commit to the next 4 years in office to my community. This is the fourth time I've had to make that decision. For me, that decision is always a very sacred thing because
What do you mean the fourth time? What do you mean?
this if I were to run for re-election, this would be my fourth election.
Oh, okay.
So
All right. Okay.
each of those times I take that as a very serious time of discernment and to think about that decision and that commitment to my community. And this time I just knew it was a 4-year term and I knew I could not commit to 4 years in this position for my community. And so when I made that decision, I sort of backed up from there and I knew I needed to step down from the role as leader of the Senate DFL caucus or the minority leader to give a new leader a chance to really get up and running because it's going to be a big year with session and we're going to have an election and everything. And so that's why I stepped down.
Who's going to be taking your place?
So our caucus elected Senator Melissa Lopez Franzen from Edina. And it's funny, she and I ran together in 2012 and have served ever since on education and transportation. And we've always considered ourselves East and West Metro sisters.
Oh, is that right? Well, that's
Yeah.
a good lineup.
Yeah.
Okay, when you're in session, give me a feelings of what it's like. I mean, you get up in the morning, 0 dark 30, and it's got to be a long, tough day.
Sessions are full, and it's weird because we haven't had a normal session now for two 2 cycles. But it is, you start early, committee work starts early, you've got meetings with constituents and interest groups, and you're working on your bills, and it is a jam-packed schedule, and you are scheduled we have 15-minute meetings, and we count on
So
our
your
assistants
time.
to keep us
Do you
moving.
have a secretary or somebody, a
Yep.
trainer or whatever?
In the Senate, we each have a legislative assistant, is
Okay.
what they're called. Yeah.
And they're the ones keep you on time and that sort of thing?
They take the constituent calls, they help with constituent services, they do the scheduling, they make sure we stay on schedule, that we have the materials we need for our hearings and our meetings, and that they help develop our bills and keep that process rolling. It is a very rich job description for those folks, and I'm lucky to serve with my assistant Isaac has been with me for 4 or 5 years now, I think.
Really?
I've only had 2 assistants. I'm really proud. Some people go through assistants kind of quickly. I've only had 2 in my almost 10 years in the Senate.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so you were saying we were talking about a daily.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So it's no day's the same. That's one of the things that's interesting, and that makes the job interesting. Every single day is its own collection of events, but it's a mix of hearings and floor sessions, and there's fewer floor sessions at the beginnings of session, but as the session goes on and the bills have made their way through the committee process, then they come up to the floor for final votes and debate. And so the days evolve, so it's very focused on committees and constituents early on, and then it just becomes really, you shift to the floor, and we spend very long days on the floor at that point.
Mm-hmm. So, how long a day do you put in during session?
It depends. It can be kind of committee hearings tend to start at 8:30. A lot of times you'll be in earlier to get meetings in before that. And committees will typically go till 5:30, but they're often, different community groups, or like I'll go to school board meetings in the evenings or city council meetings in my district, or you're going to go meet with, groups of constituents will have events about transportation, for example, or something like that. So those are long. They are long days, and then, like I said, when you get into the long floor sessions, those can easily go into the middle of the night or wee hours of the morning.
Okay, so you never tell your husband, "I'll be home about 5." Huh?
I will tell him I think I might be home by 5 or 7, but no. And that's what makes this job fascinating, but also kind of challenging. It's way more than full-time when we're in session. And then when you're out of session, it's definitely more flexible. But we still have a lot of constituent work that we need to do. We're still working on bills and issues in what we call the interim, which is the time that we're not in session. And of course, last year with COVID, we were having special sessions every 30 days. And that was a lot of time as well.
Yep. So, and I got a question there about that COVID. I'll get to that later. But okay, now a lot of these committees you served on, what are some of the things that you got passed or sponsored and got passed and that you're most proud of?
Yep. Well, education was primary for me. I come from a family of educators. I value education so much for my own family, and I know it's so important for the state of Minnesota that we have strong schools. That's a big part of why my husband and I moved back here when my son was 2 years old, because we knew the quality of life and education and family was central here in Minnesota. But I served on the educations committees throughout my tenure. A couple of things that I did, obviously we've done historic school funding. We're still not keeping up with inflation. We've still lost ground over the past couple of decades. Because whenever we have an economic downturn, we have to make cuts, and we never ever really get caught back up. And so that's a thing we still need to continue doing, but we've worked hard at it to get where we are and to minimize the losses. And when you see those levies on your local ballots, it's because the school districts are having to make up the difference for what the state isn't doing. So when people talk about we need to keep taxes low and we need to cut spending, a big chunk of that, almost half of that, is in K-12 education. And if that gets cut, then you're going to have your local districts coming back trying to make up the difference or making really dramatic school cuts.
Okay, so...
But what I'm proudest of is I've been able to do funding to increase the number of counselors and nurses and social workers that we know Minnesota is so far behind on. Another thing that I led was something called data disaggregation, which I know makes people's eyes glaze over, but it's the way we analyze that important testing data to make sure that we're really understanding, not just in very broad groups of students, but in very targeted groups of students, who needs what sort of support and help. And so that was an important policy thing that I was able to support, as well as helping with all-day kindergarten, for example, which made such a difference in the lives of so many Minnesota students and families.
Mm-hmm. And lunch programs and that kind of thing, were you
Yes,
involved in that?
I was, yes, absolutely. And I was really glad we were able to finally get that done. They wouldn't do it when I was the DFL author, the Senate majority.
Really?
The Senate Republicans blocked it because even though it was sponsored by a Republican in the House who was in the minority there, and I was in the minority in the Senate, once they assigned a Senate Republican to carry the bill, then they passed it.
Boy.
But I think that's so typical.
Okay, so speaking of schools, now we see that we're St. Paul School District. I mean, you're not in St. Paul School District or anything, but you cover this because of the
Right.
funding. They're closing schools. Right. Enrollment is down.
Right.
What's that all about?
There are a number of factors, you know, and especially because we do live in a school district that is, so I live in South Washington County Schools. I live across like 3 houses down from 622 North St. Paul Maplewood,
Sure.
Oakdale,
Yes.
where my husband and his whole family went. And I represent a lot of families in that district as well as in the Stillwater district. And we're seeing different aspects of this across the board. Very different districts, all of them, but you know, a lot of families are moving out to the suburbs, as they always have, and they want a slightly bigger house for a little less money. They want room for a dog. They need extra garage space or basement space for a growing family, and they want good schools too. And so St. Paul has good schools, has great schools, but you know that tradition of families moving to the suburbs continues. And so I think that's been part of it. We know that there has been disruption because families really struggled during COVID to make sure their kids were getting educated, and sometimes they needed to make different decisions for their kids based on what was going on, what was available through their public school system, and even the bus driver shortage, you know, and we're seeing that across the state from our largest cities to our smallest rural communities. It's a real challenge in terms of staffing our schools, and that's going to be something that we're going to have to deal with for a while now.
That's interesting because I think the whole country is
Yes.
hurting for bus drivers.
Yes.
And a simple little thing like that. I mean, and you think of parents, you know, get up in the morning, pack the kids up and walk them out the door.
Right.
It's not happening
It's not happening.
anymore.
Or you're not sure if they're going to come on time. And
Yes.
do you really want your kids standing out for a long time on a really cold morning next to a really tall snow pile, right?
Absolutely. So is that something that you would be funding, you know, like bus drivers and that kind of thing?
Well, I
on
mean,
a statewide level?
Yeah, so, I mean, transportation funding is a part of the education funding system, and there's a way we do that, and there's actually ways that certain districts get a little extra funding, like if it's a really big school district that has longer travel times, for example, they may get a little extra funding for that. But this is less about a funding issue. I mean, I think we could talk about potentially paying more people, but you know, there have often been school bus drivers who are retired from their other careers, and they do this because they can do it on a part-time basis and make some money, and they enjoy, you know, being around the kids. But you know, COVID changed things for seniors, and so a lot of them had, you know, that was not a job they could continue doing and feel safe doing it. So there are just a number of factors, and this is true across. You know, you talk about my work in jobs and economic development. This is true in a number of industries. We've talked a lot about the healthcare sector. You know, we need more workers in Minnesota for sure, because it becomes a damper on our overall economy if we can't fill those jobs and get that work done.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how has the last 3 years gone in terms of getting things done in such a divided legislature?
I know there are people who think that divided legislature in theory, and actually I'm one of them. In theory, I think a divided legislature could be healthy, that you could have a good, healthy debate and work through the legislative process to come up with good bills that represent healthy compromises. But that's not what's going on. And I know there's going to be an element of people who say both parties do it. But, and I think you're seeing this in Washington right now, you know, Democrats, I believe, want to make compromises as needed, as long as they can make progress to get things done for the people we serve. But what I have witnessed over and over again, and it's gotten worse. That's what's interesting to me. And just in the almost 10 years that I've been in office, it has gotten worse in terms of Republican obstructionism. You look right now, one of the stories that's making headlines is this working group on the issue of pay for frontline workers. And the reality is, back when the budget was done in this past spring session, that was something Democrats really, really wanted and fought hard for, and Republicans were really opposed to. They did not want to allocate that money to support workers who had sacrificed so much over the time of COVID. But they accepted it as part of a bigger bargain. I'm not exactly sure, because even though I was the DFL leader in the Senate, I wasn't invited to all the negotiations.
Really?
But they didn't really want it, but they accepted it. But we had this working group that was designed to do it, and it was contingent on coming to an agreement. Well, there's no incentive. If you really don't want that money, that $250 million to be spent on workers, there's really no incentive to come to an agreement. And so they decided to define frontline workers very narrowly as only certain types of healthcare workers. And DFLers looked at this and said, no, we know that the people in our grocery stores were the ones who made sure. They came in, they didn't have a choice. They were there around the public. All they had was a mask to protect them, no vaccines at that time, and they made sure that we could all put food on the table for our families, even when there were shortages. And they and others who made so many sacrifices, they were the frontline workers who kept our families able to continue eating, going to school. Obviously the healthcare and the public health side of it, first responders. There were so many people who made those sacrifices, and the Republicans have not been negotiating in good faith, and that's why we're at a stalemate.
So how could you divvy that money up, though? I mean, when you get that many people, and there are a ton of them that you've even mentioned, there's other ones that you couldn't even mention.
Right. And that was the work of that group, and they really analyzed it. They listened to testimony. They looked at a lot of the numbers. They listened to the different specifics about the nature of the work and who was really making the sacrifices and didn't, and how they were affected in their workplace during COVID, and that they were making those determinations. And it was a question of, given that we have $250 million allocated right now, can we, if we give it to fewer people, we give them more money. If we give it to more people, we give them less money. But guess what? We're coming back in session January 31st. We could come back with more. If we give a little bit of money now to a larger group of people, we could give a little more to them in a few more months, right? But the problem is that they're not even willing to negotiate. They're not even willing to consider adding anybody else to the list.
You know what? And this just brings a bigger problem, I will call it. I mean, as an outsider looking in, it seems to me that the Republicans are fighting everything. I mean, they're the most naysayers around, and they get a lot of publicity on this too, and I just don't understand that. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. They're fighting everything, the mandates, just anything. And a lot of it is such mundane, silly things, I guess. I mean, it's like they're looking for PR, just looking for press.
Right.
Okay, go answer that one.
And that is, again, this is something that I have watched evolve over years, and then really seems to have come to a really bright line during this past couple of years, particularly around COVID. It was during COVID. Ultimately, I agree with you on the part about it being about PR. I would take it a step further and say it is about further angering their base. And a small group of people. This is not just about former President Donald Trump, but it's related to that dynamic that has surrounded the Republican Party since he really came forward.
Sure.
And so riling up the base is a good way to make sure you have voters fired up to show up and vote, to make sure that they are volunteering and giving money and doing all that. There are also a lot of individuals and organizations that make money off these audiences, let's be clear, too, right? So, there's a business that is involved in this, too. But you're exactly right, whether it's essentially firing, it's refusing to confirm commissioners. They refused, and that was an absolute lie of omission from former Majority Leader Gazelka to me personally about their plans, and they ended up firing the Commissioner of Labor and Industry when we were in the midst of trying to protect our workforce. Nancy Lepek, with amazing experience, talented, then Commissioner of Commerce, Commissioner of Pollution and Control Agency, and now they are coming after
the
Department of Health Commissioner Jan Malcolm, who is absolutely heroic. I have had the opportunity to work closely with her as caucus leader and watch the sacrifices that she has made and how hard she has worked. Our Department of Health and our public health system here in Minnesota is highly regarded around the country. And we've actually been able to be sort of like testing sites for certain things because of the work that she and her department do. And they are using this as a political weapon.
That's right.
And it's just wrong. It is not good for the people of Minnesota. It is not the way this was envisioned. After I've been on the front lines of this for the past couple of years now, I absolutely believe we have to change how we do these appointments and confirmations, because it is an abuse of the process and the purpose, the way that the Senate Republicans are handling it now.
Yeah, okay. And again, I'm on the outside looking in, and I just, every time I pick up the paper, I end up being so angry that, and it just shouldn't be that way. I should be able to be adjust to you people and let you do your job.
Yeah.
Do your job, but it just isn't working that way. And I can't editorialize because this isn't that. But anyway, that's how I feel. So anyway, okay, I just, how do you feel about all the security around the state capitol? I mean, things have changed in that field too.
Yeah.
And that's not only in the state capitol, that's council meetings and school board meetings and any place where there's public speakers or public people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just absolutely scary.
Yeah.
The stuff that's going on.
And that's another case where there's always been an element of that. We always knew that during certain issues and hearings, we know that security would be tightened up. And then, of course, with COVID, where we literally locked down the building, that changed things, but that was for health reasons. But then you started seeing demonstrations, and then there were actual security concerns about public behavior, which, as we saw in January 6th with the Capitol, the risk is very real.
Unbelievable.
I am so grateful for the very thoughtful leadership of the State Patrol, who's in charge of security for the Capitol. Eric Roski, absolutely.
My good friend.
And I'm going to give a shout out to Colonel Matt Langer, because I have worked with him over the years before he ascended to that role. And he is really committed to security and doing it in a way that keeps everybody safe and doesn't target anybody. But it has been a difficult dance because, you know, historically Minnesota legislators have been very proud of the People's House and access, and that people can just walk in and walk up to my legislative assistant's desk and ask if they can meet with me, you know, or set an appointment. And it is tough. A lot of that, again, is due to COVID and is still due to COVID, but the security aspects of this has been challenging.
You know what, I remember interviewing Nora Slawick, and I remember her saying that she was leaving a committee meeting and they were walking down the stairs and there were people in the lobby area demonstrating and they were screaming and hollering. She told me she was scared. I mean, literally scared. And this is a while back. I'm not sure even they had coppers around guarding them that much. And I'm sure you're under pretty good guarded duty, right? You have people all around you, right? But I remember her telling me she was so scared. She's just doing her job. She was just, you know, in a committee meeting, came out the door, and these people, and they are angry. Angry.
And passions get high, particularly around certain issues, and we understand that. I do think it's concerning that we do have people allowed to have concealed carry guns in our Capitol. I don't know that I think that's the best idea.
No, God.
But, you know, we go in and we do our job, and we know people are passionate about the things that they care about, but we need to be careful. You know, we need to make sure that there is not bullying going on that chases people, good people, out of public service.
That's happening in school board meetings. School board people aren't rerunning, and they might be good people. But they're scared to death.
And as a society, we need to ask that question, right? I mean, because I know there was a time when legislators' homes were being protested at, right? We have 201 legislators in the Minnesota legislature between the House and the Senate. We don't want to pay the security bills for every single one of us to have high security stationed around us, you know? That is not the way, that is not what we signed up for. You know, I don't think that's what Minnesota taxpayers want to end up coming to that. And then you add all the city council and the county commissioners and the school board members around the state. We don't want to be in that sort of security state.
That means the good people aren't running, and it's scared to death.
Exactly right.
You know, so you don't know who's going to be up there.
Right.
Okay, we're just run out of time, but I want to ask you. You know, you're retiring. You're going to be done. And when? When are you going to be done?
So I will serve the rest of my term, and so I will serve until a new senator is sworn in at the very beginning of January 2023. So I have
2023.
I have a little bit more of a year. And
we got time.
I need to take care of my mom. She is older and has serious health conditions. She's currently in Dallas, but we're going to get her moved up here to the East Metro.
Oh, are you? Oh, good deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I am her only caretaker, and she needs more of my time than this job allows me to do. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's two not goods. Your mother not being good, and you not being here for us. Okay, so really quick, we're really out of time here, but what are your quick plans for the future?
The good news is I have a year to figure that out, because I'm going to have this job for another year, and I'm going to use my time there. But I am considering my options. I've learned so much, and I'm so privileged here to have done this work. I've learned a bunch of things that I want to keep working on. I'm very interested in campaign finance reform, because I think that fundamentally we can't make the other changes we make until we get the money, especially the hidden money out of politics. Our environment and the issues of climate change and environmental stewardship, that's too important to our kids and our grandkids and their kids. We need to do that work. And those are the kinds of areas that I would like to be able to spend more time focusing on. Okay.
Well, I want to thank you for your service. You're one of my favorite people. You seem to have a saneness around you. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us on Oakdale Update. I think we covered a lot of stuff, but we could have been here another half hour at least. Thank you, Susan, for joining us.
Thank you, Frank. Always a pleasure.
Okay. And I want to thank Susan for her service, and thank you for watching. We leave you with a look at how Oakdale residents are doing their part to save lives. Have a safe and happy Thanksgiving.
For those of us a bit squeamish when it comes to the business of blood,
Hey Josh, how many times have you donated?
it helps to have something or someone to serve as a distraction.
The thought of getting your finger stuck? Oh God, I'd rather be front row with Justin Bieber, man. I mean, that does not sound fun.
And who's drawn more blood, he says, than Pink Floyd has played Money live.
I just distract. Go front row at some rock concert. Just mentally go somewhere. And before you know it, you're walking out of here with a bottle of water.
Scott Hubler has been extracting blood for the past 13 years for the American Red Cross, but his job, he says, is so much more.
The rewarding thing is something that a paycheck can't give.
Currently, the American Red Cross is experiencing an emergency blood and platelet shortage that's caused the blood supply to drop to the lowest post-summer level in at least 6 years.
All blood is most needed, all blood. But the most preferred type is O negative because it's universal and we can put it in anybody.
In addition, blood donor turnout has decreased by about 10% since summer. It's why resident and Oakdale Wellness 50-plus volunteer Polly Carlson helped organize a recent drive at the Discovery Center.
There's always a need for blood, and I've been giving blood since the 1970s. My parents gave blood, and that probably started, my dad was a World War II vet. And so it's sort of been instilled in me through the years to do this.
Carlson says the drives fill up quickly, crediting the amazing people of Oakdale for donating. People like Josh.
Just trying to help out. There's a need out there for blood, and just trying to do what I can.
Hubler has heard many personal stories from clients over the years, but blood donation impacted him personally while his father was dying of leukemia.
Believe me, I thank every donor for their donation because my dad was in constant need of those products for a whole year before he finally passed away. So, thank you.
It's why it makes his job critical, and most other technicians agree.
It's really rewarding. Even if you have a hard day at work, and things come up and you get frustrated with just the normal day-to-day stuff, at the end I go home and I know that I at least played my part in saving lives, so that's very rewarding.
The Red Cross provides about 40% of our nation's blood, yet only about 3% of eligible people donate each year. Hubler says if everyone understood the need and the simplicity of the experience, more people might roll up a sleeve.
And usually I hear stories every day from donors. Oh, I'm down here donating because my best friend's daughter needs blood, or a spouse, a family member, a son, a daughter. That's what inspires people, and once they get down here, they're like, wow, I thought it was more complicated than this. This was easy, an easy experience. So yeah, if people were more educated on this whole thing, we would have a line out the door every day.